There are many things in our world right now that we use to do science and to complete certain goals. Arguably, one of the greatest achievements that we have ever had is that of the International Space Station. Why? Because this is a literal space station that we have put in suborbit, and it has remained up there for quite some time, and has allowed us to learn about gravity and the effects that it and space as a whole have on people, animals, and various objects. But the funniest bit is that when its time is done, it's not gonna go out like you think. Allow us to show you NASA's shocking plan to crash the ISS. Number 6. The International Space Station. If you wish to know a very literal definition of the International Space Station, that would be a space station that acts as a microgravity and space environment research laboratory in which crew members conduct experiments in biology, human biology, physics, astronomy, meteorology, and other fields. The station is suited for the testing of spacecraft systems and equipment required for missions to the Moon and Mars. The ISS is one of the most important things in the world of space research and technology. To that end, it wasn't one nation that helped make this thing real, rather it was a bunch of them coming together to make it happen. In fact, the people who helped build, launch, and run the ISS include NASA, the United States, Roscosmos, Russia, JAXA, Japan, ESA, Europe, and CSA, Canada. So that is 5 nations coming together to further their knowledge of space. That international flavor also goes to the crew of the ISS, as they are oftentimes a mix of people from the various countries and their allies who helped make and run the station. And ever since it was launched, we have learned a great many things from it. Number 5. What gets tested up on the ISS? We'll be diving into what gets experimented on in the International Space Station in a little bit, but in a grander scope, the ISS serves as a perfect testing ground for all kinds of items. For example, since this is a space station and 5 space agencies are using it to test things about space while in space, one of the things that they like to do is send up new space parts for things like shuttles, probes, satellites, etc., and have the crews test them for all sorts of faults, glitches, how they'll react under microgravity, radiation, and more. Another thing that honestly gets tested is the astronauts themselves. I mean, think about it. Gravity doesn't just test random objects that we send into space, it affects human beings as well. So because of that, the humans on the ISS become their own kind of guinea pigs, which was good in a way when we realized almost too late that microgravity has a negative effect on the human body when not controlled. So because of that, the ISS now has a full-on gym that allows astronauts to exercise in order to keep their bodies strong for when they get back to Earth. And this is still only the beginning of what they try and test up on the International Space Station. So let's dive into some of the experiments that they do up there, shall we? Number 4. Experiments Part 1. Since there's still a lot that we don't know about space, and more importantly, how certain objects interact with space as a whole, the people on the ISS have a lot of experiments to do. For example, have you ever wondered how things like bacteria would react to being in microgravity? NASA certainly had a curiosity about it, so they decided to send some samples up in 2 different space missions, and what they found was actually quite frightening. Mainly, they found that things like salmonella actually get more intense in space, and not just by a little, but 3 to 7 times more intense than they are on Earth. So how does that work? Well, it has to do with conditions. On a space shuttle or the ISS with no gravity and certain space lights filling the place, the bacteria thinks that it's inside a human gut, where it reacts with things and makes people sick. But thankfully, because of this research, a special vaccine was created to counter the hypervirulent bacteria, as well as finding a special protein within it that actually regulates how it acts in certain conditions. Pretty cool, huh? Number 3. Experiments Part 2. Whether you're on Earth or in space, having a fire break out in an enclosed area is never a good thing. In fact, it was a flash fire that killed the astronauts of the first Apollo space mission. In space, though, you have to wonder not only how fire will interact with the environment, but also how to put it out. Under very controlled circumstances on the International Space Station, these experiments were carried out with some interesting results. First off, fires in space don't burn the same way as on Earth. Without gravity compressing the oxygen all around them, they burn small and at lower temperatures than expected. They can also burn with less oxygen present. Now, due to this, the flames need to be doused with higher concentrations of retardants and extinguishers. However, there are some space fires that will apparently continue to burn despite being extinguished. So what other experiments have they done up there? Well, how about plants? We often take for granted the simple actions and things that happen on Earth that may not work exactly how you think they should in space, which is why these experiments happen. One such question was whether plants could actually grow in space. So in 2012 on the International Space Station, a zucchini plant was grown, and the astronaut who took care of it, Don Petit, actually wrote a blog post from the perspective of the plant to talk about its growth. This was not only important because of the effects of gravity on plants, but how potential space radiation would affect plants too. The obvious implications of this is that if plants can be grown in space or on other planets that are not like Earth, they could help provide both oxygen and food for the crews and colonists on long-term missions. While it may seem a bit boring to those of us on Earth, the experiments that are being done on the ISS will help us as we get ready for our next steps into space, even if that means after the ISS comes back down to Earth. Oh, and we mean that in a very literal fashion. Number 2, the fall of the International Space Station. At present, the International Space Station is scheduled to remain working until 2030, barring something happening to it in space or the budget being pulled. But that raises a rather large and curious question. Mainly, what happens to the ISS when its mission is done? Does it just remain in space? Will it be the latest piece of space junk to just roam about the atmosphere? No, it won't stay in the atmosphere. It has a more spectacular death to accomplish, if you will. How so? Well, they're going to let it crash back down to Earth. Okay, only in a small way. You see, space parts, mainly space shuttle parts, have dropped out of the sky before, but when they do, they drop into the ocean. Specifically, they drop to a point known as Point Nemo. This is a spot in the ocean where life is very limited, and it is over 1,600 miles away from any other point of land. So when the time comes for the ISS to fall, that's where they're going to aim it. Now, the whole station won't fall into this one spot. The atmosphere will rip it to shreds, burning it up, melting it down, and overall making it a lot smaller, which means it'll go into the ocean without much issue, and without harming a lot of life. Short of blowing it up, which has its own problems and such, it really is the best option available. Number 1, the next ISS. So if the International Space Station dies in 2030, what will be the next space station to go up? That is currently classified, but some countries like the Russians already have plans in mind. But no matter what, you can bet that a newer station will be going up eventually. And by the time that 2030 comes around, we could have all sorts of advances in technology that allow us to make a space station that is even more advanced than the ISS. Think about it like this. The ISS was put up into space in 1998, over 20 years ago. Computers weren't a mainstream thing, certain wireless technologies weren't built yet, and much more. There has been a lot of big things in technology that could lead to the ISS 2.0 being way more advanced than the one hovering over us right now. And in 8 years' time, who knows what other advances there may be. So while it'll go down in a blaze of glory, the ISS station can know that it served its purpose very well, and just as important, it is a building block for all that comes next. So, what do you think? What do you think of this look at the International Space Station and how it is so much more than you might have realized, as well as the shocking way it's going to end its tenure? Have you ever wanted to go up to the ISS? Do you feel that there is still a lot more for us to learn from it before it comes crashing down? Let us know in the comments below, and we'll see you next time on the channel.